I never thought that one quiet talk inside my own home could slowly break everything I believed was safe and steady. I always believed that home was the place where nothing bad could truly happen. I believed that if I stayed calm and kind, things would stay okay. I believed that family meant protection. Before I continue further, don't forget to subscribe and join the awesome community. Drop a comment below to tell me where you're watching from and what you think of the story. My name is Silvera Thorne. I am 29 years old. I live in a small town near Nashville. It is not a big town. People know each other. Life moves slowly. I always tried to keep my life simple. I went to work. I came home. I stayed quiet. I tried not to cause problems. I protected my personal space. I avoided fights. I did not like loud voices or angry words. I believed that peace was more important than being right. I believed that if I stayed calm, nothing bad would happen. That night, everything changed. I was standing in the kitchen. The lights were on. The house was quiet. I could hear small sounds like the fridge humming and my footsteps on the floor. I thought it was just another normal night. Then my mother spoke. Her voice cut through the room suddenly. It was steady. It was sharp. It did not shake. It did not hesitate. It sounded cold, like the door of a freezer closing. She said, "The money will go to pay for your sister's vacation." That was all she said. There was no pause. There was no question. There was no space for me to answer. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not beg her to stop. I just stood there. Inside my chest, something felt heavy and tight. My mind worked slowly, like it did not want to understand the truth yet. But the truth came anyway, step by step, like cold water filling a room. The house my father left to me was gone. That house was the only thing my father ever gave me that felt strong and real. It was not just a building. It was safe. It was proof that he saw me. It was the one thing that felt like it truly belonged to me. And it had already been sold. No one told me. No one warned me. No one asked me. After my mother spoke, the room felt empty and heavy at the same time. The air felt thick. The silence stayed in the kitchen long after her words were gone. I did not argue because something inside me became very clear. Talking would not fix what was already done. Yelling would not bring the house back. Crying would not change her mind. But my actions could change what came next. So I turned away. I walked slowly to my room. I closed the door behind me. I sat on my bed. Then I opened my laptop. My hands were calm. My face was calm. But inside, I was awake in a way I had never been before. Quietly, without telling anyone, I began preparing something that would later change everything. 3 days later, my mother called me. Her voice was different this time. It sounded soft. It sounded careful. It sounded almost sweet. She said, "My dear, can we talk? Can we work something out?" I listened without speaking for a moment. Then I answered, "Never." My voice was calm but cold. Then I said, "Before I continue, tell me where you are watching from." Press. If you believe that family should never take what belongs to you, press like. If you want to hear the full story, subscribe. Growing up in that house never felt fair or safe, even when everything was quiet. Some homes feel warm. Some homes feel equal. Ours did not. My mother, Zephyra, controlled the house without yelling. He did not need to shout. Her silence was powerful. Her looks were powerful. Everyone knew when she approved of something and when she did not. Every decision went through her first. Big decisions. Small decisions. Even tiny ones. We learned to watch her face before speaking. We learned to move carefully, like walking on a floor that might break. My father, Selim, tried to keep things running smoothly. He liked routine. He liked calm days. But he did not protect us strongly. He believed that avoiding conflict would keep peace. So when things felt unfair, he stayed quiet. When tension grew, he waited. He hoped time would make things better. But time did not change much. My sister, Isolde, lived in the house easily. He did not have to try hard. She understood without explaining. When choices were made, they usually helped her. No one said it out loud, but everyone accepted it. Everyone except me. When I was about 10 years old, I learned something important. Speaking too fast caused trouble. Saying how I felt made things worse. So I started holding my words inside my mouth before letting them out. I thought carefully before speaking. I watched people closely. I learned when to stay silent. Silence became something I practiced. Over time it became normal. As I grew older, I learned how to make myself smaller. When conversations changed, I listened instead of joining. When tension appeared, I stepped aside. I learned how to disappear without leaving the room. I saw how Isolde could change her mind with no punishment. But I had to adjust quietly and accept things without complaint. My mother never said she expected more from me. He did not have to. I felt it in the way chores were given. I felt it in the way mistakes were judged. I felt it in the weight of disappointment when it came from my side. My father sometimes tried to soften things. He asked for patience. He asked for time. But his words were gentle. They never changed the rules of the house. I stopped hoping for fairness. Instead, I focused on control. Not control over others, but control over myself. My reactions. My plans. My future. Living in that house taught me discipline. Not from guidance, but from watching and waiting. I learned that fairness was something I would have to build on my own. 2 months after my father died, the house felt different. The silence was heavier than sadness. It was no longer just grief. It was a tension that no one wanted to name. The legal process moved slowly. That gave my mother time to act calm on the outside while things underneath felt shaky. We had conversations where everyone chose words carefully. Faces stayed calm. Pauses felt planned. Even when no one said it, something had changed. My father's will was very clear. He gave the house to me. The papers were signed. They were witnessed. They were recorded correctly. There was no mistake. At first, no one reacted. But I noticed small changes. My mother's posture shifted. Her eyes felt distant. Her voice stayed soft but colder. Isolde started asking questions. She wanted to know where the papers were. Who had seen them? She watched everything closely. My lawyer, Lucien Voss, explained things clearly. The house was mine. No one could take it without breaking the law. My father's wishes were protected. After that, the house changed. My mother stopped talking openly about plans. She watched her words around me. Isolde started talking about repairs, money, and ideas for the house. Her words sounded helpful, but they felt like quiet moves for control. I felt uncomfortable in my own home. No one yelled. No one argued. But pressure filled the rooms. It lived in looks, pauses, and tone changes. I understood then that the house was not just about money. It was about control. About who decided what mattered. I stayed quiet not because I was weak but because I was learning. The house was legally mine, but the feeling inside it was no longer safe. 2 weeks later, the tension grew heavier. One afternoon, my neighbor Mrs. Seraphine came to talk to me. Her voice was careful. She said strangers had been walking around the house. They took pictures. They placed signs near the driveway. She spoke slowly, not to scare me but because she wanted me to understand. And in that moment I knew something was very wrong. I walked outside with a calm face, even though inside my chest felt heavy and confused. I tried to look normal, like nothing was wrong, but my feelings did not match my face at all. The air outside felt the same as always. The sky looked normal. The front yard looked just like it did every other day. The grass was still there. The trees were still standing. The house was still in the same place, strong and quiet like it had always been. Nothing about the house itself looked different. But something felt very wrong the moment my eyes landed on a large sign near the edge of the lawn. It was pushed into the ground, standing tall and proud. The word "sold" was written in big, bold letters. I stopped walking. My feet would not move. I stood there for a long time staring at that sign. My brain tried to understand what my eyes were seeing, but it did not make sense right away. I did not shout. I did not run inside. I did not cry. I just stood there and tried to understand how something that belonged to me, something I felt connected to, could suddenly be shown to everyone as already finished, already gone, already decided. It felt like someone had erased me from my own story without asking. Instead of going inside the house and starting a fight, I made a different choice. I got into my car. I closed the door slowly. I started the engine and drove away. I drove to the real estate office that had handled the sale of the house. My hand stayed steady on the steering wheel. My heart was beating fast, but I did not let it control me. When I arrived, I walked inside and stood at the desk. A woman was sitting behind it, looking at a computer. I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse her or anyone else. I did not act angry. I simply asked for information. I asked to see the papers because I believed I had the right to understand what had happened. The woman clicked on her computer and stared at the screen for a long time. The room was quiet. I waited without speaking. Finally, she looked up and explained that the papers showed the house had already been sold. She said the transfer was completed and signed by my mom. She said everything looked clean, complete, and official. Then she told me something that made my stomach feel tight. She said my name was not on the papers anywhere. I thanked her quietly and walked out. I drove back home. I did not call anyone. I did not scream in the car. I did not cry. I did not hit the steering wheel. I stayed quiet the whole way. When I got home, I did not say anything right away. I waited. I waited until Mom walked into the kitchen. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm and even though my hands felt stiff at my sides. I asked her why the house had been sold without telling me. She looked at me calmly. Too calmly. Her face looked like she had already prepared for this moment. Like she knew this question would come one day. She did not look sorry. She did not look confused. She said, "You don't get to question me." Her words landed hard between us. For a short moment I thought she might explain. I thought she might soften. I thought she might say something kind. But she did not. Instead, she raised her voice just enough to show control, not fear. Then she said something that changed the way I saw everything in that house. She said the money from the house would be used to pay for my sister's vacation. She said it like it was already decided. Like there was no room for discussion. Like my feelings did not matter. Isolde was standing nearby. She had heard everything. He did not look surprised. She did not say anything. She did not turn away. Her face stayed still and calm. That made the room feel smaller, like the walls were closing in. I did not argue. I did not explain myself. I did not defend my side. I stayed quiet. Not because I agreed, but because I understood something important at that moment. Talking would not change anything. Words were not strong enough to fix what had already been done. Silence felt stronger than shouting. That night I did not sit with my anger. I did not replay the conversation over and over in my head. I did not imagine different endings. Instead, I opened my laptop. I began collecting documents, emails, records, and dates. I organized everything carefully. I worked slowly and calmly, like someone solving a puzzle. I did not feel angry while doing this. I felt clear. I knew the truth did not need noise to exist. It just needed proof. The house no longer felt safe. No longer felt like home. It felt like something that had been taken without my permission. What stayed with me the most was not just the sale of the house, but the confidence in Mom's voice. She truly believed she could make decisions about my future without asking me. That night something inside me changed. I felt quieter, colder, and more focused. I left the house without telling anyone where I was going. I drove through streets that felt empty and still. Then I stopped outside Lucian's office. Only one light was on behind the frosted glass. I did not feel scared. I did not feel dramatic. I felt focused. Lucian opened the door and looked at me for a few seconds. He did not ask questions. He stepped aside and let me walk in. I placed every document I had collected on his desk. Papers, emails, copies of records, saved times and dates. He watched quietly as I laid everything out. He began reading carefully. He moved slowly, not because he was slow, but because he understood how serious this was. His fingers paused at certain signatures. His eyes narrowed when he saw certain stamps. When he reached the final pages, his breathing changed slightly. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but serious. He explained that the signature on the papers did not look natural. He said the pressure patterns were strange. He said the timing did not match. He explained that Mom did not have the legal right to do what she had done, even if the papers looked official to someone who did not know the law. He told me this was not a misunderstanding. It was a misuse of authority. It was something that could be challenged. I did not shout. I did not act shocked. I did not ask if he was sure. I simply asked him to prepare everything quietly. I told him not to tell anyone. Not to warn anyone. Not to let anyone know I was involved. Lucian agreed without hesitation. That night he worked carefully. He scanned documents. He checked records. He prepared sealed evidence. He worked with care and focus. I watched in silence because there was nothing more to say. When I left his office, the city felt quiet in a new way. It did not feel like fear. It felt like control. Over the next few days, everything moved forward without a single word spoken in my house. Documents were sent through official channels. No one was warned. No one was told. Inside the house, nothing changed on the surface. No arguments. No questions. No apologies. During that time, I noticed Isolde's social media. She posted photos of packed bags. She shared pictures of clothes laid out on a bed. He talked about trips and fun places. I did not read the comments. I did not react. I closed the screen. Watching did not bring pain or joy. It only reminded me that staying quiet was still the right choice. Inside the house I stayed calm. I spoke little. I moved through rooms without asking questions. I let them believe I accepted everything. I let them believe I did not notice. 3 days later, Mom called me early in the morning. I almost did not answer. Silence had become my strength. When I did answer, her voice sounded different. Softer. Unsure. She asked if we could talk. She spoke slowly and carefully. She talked about pressure. About mistakes. About families making choices that later feel wrong. She did not say sorry. She did not admit she was wrong. She talked around the truth without touching it. When she suggested we quietly fix things without involving anyone else, I understood. This was not about healing. This was about fear. I listened without reacting. I did not comfort her. I did not argue. I let her speak until she ran out of words. Then I stayed silent. And in that silence she finally understood that quiet can speak louder than anything else. When she stopped talking, I only said what I really needed to say. I said no calmly, without giving any explanations, without making any promises, and without asking for anything in return. Then I ended the phone call in a way that made it clear there would be no more talking about it. From that moment on, things began to change quietly without me having to push or force them. Isolde's life started to change little by little without any noise or announcements. No one outside seemed to notice what was happening, and nobody publicly showed sympathy or pity for her. Her confidence, which had seemed so strong before, slowly started to crack. Money problems began to touch every little corner of her life. Things that she used to take for granted now felt uncertain. Trips she had planned for fun slowly disappeared from her schedule. Small expenses that used to feel safe and secure now seemed fragile and uncertain. Promises that had once sounded solid and trustworthy began to feel thin, as though they might break at any moment. Even her family started to change. Some relatives contacted me privately, calling carefully and quietly, almost as if they were afraid someone else might hear them. They said that they finally understood more than they had before. Others chose to stay silent because it felt easier than facing the truth. Meals at home and late-night phone calls began to feel different. Boundaries that had never existed before slowly appeared. People no longer crossed lines without thinking. What surprised me the most was how little I actually had to do. I didn't argue with anyone. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't explain myself. I simply stopped responding the way people had grown used to. Just by not giving them what they expected, the balance of power changed on its own. This time, being quiet did not make me weaker as they had believed it would. Instead, it put me out of reach of the old patterns they had learned to use to control me. My mother tried calling again later that evening, but I let the phone ring until it stopped on its own. I did not want to repeat a conversation I had already heard enough times to understand its true nature. There was no pleasure in winning. There was no desire for revenge. There was no satisfaction in watching everything fall apart. There was only a very clear feeling that real control does not come from shouting, forcing, or destroying, but from the ability to step back enough so that others are forced to face the consequences of what they themselves created. For the first time, I felt a shift in my inner world. It was not relief or happiness, but a quiet stability. I understood that I no longer belonged to the old roles that others had tried to make me play. The silence after that was no longer empty. It carried a steadiness that was hard to shake. 2 weeks after the investigation started, I went to the courtroom. The room felt colder than I had expected. Not because the heater was broken, but because every sound seemed sharper, louder, and impossible to ignore. I sat quietly at the end of the wooden bench. My hands rested calmly in my lap. I felt the grain of the wood under my fingertips. The room slowly filled with careful footsteps, soft voices, and controlled breathing. The official proceedings started without any ceremony. Papers were moved quietly, clerks whispered to each other, and the judge watched everything with calm authority. The judge seemed used to letting the truth appear slowly without any dramatic gestures. When Lucian stood up to speak, there was no need for loud gestures or shouting. The documents themselves explained everything clearly. He showed all the mistakes and problems with a careful and steady voice. He did not rush. He did not hesitate. The details revealed mistakes that had been hidden behind signatures, shortcuts, and small rule-breaking. His tone was logical and balanced, not angry. Every detail settled in the room and could not be ignored. I stayed still while the judge followed each word, eyes narrowing slightly as the errors became clear. My mom sat across the room. Her shoulders were tense and her hands were folded too tightly together. She tried to speak once but stopped when the judge raised a hand, showing that interruptions would not control the meeting. Her usual confidence did not disappear all at once. It drained slowly, like color fading from fabric that had been washed too many times. When Isolde was called to testify, the room changed slightly. She walked to the front without looking at me. She held her bag tightly as if it could anchor her. She answered the questions simply, directly, and honestly. Each answer brought her closer to the reality she could no longer ignore. There was no dramatic crying, no shouting, only a slow realization that preparation for a fancy life did not matter when the facts were clear and could not be argued with. When the judge announced the temporary freezing of the disputed money and property, the courtroom became silent. This silence was deliberate. It was not a shock. It was a quiet understanding that something irreversible had just happened. I remained still, face calm, eyes forward. This was not a victory to celebrate or a loss to mourn. It was a correction, done in a way that felt clean and fair, clearer than any argument could ever be. My mom tried speaking again when the ruling was explained. Her voice was softer now, less certain, as though the ground beneath her words had disappeared. The judge did not show impatience. He repeated things calmly, making it clear that the process would continue without emotions controlling it. I noticed her hands loosen slightly for a moment, then tighten again out of habit, not control. I felt no need to look at anyone in the room. I did not need to measure their reactions. I did not want to prove a point with my expression. My strength was quiet inside me. It was not a shield. It was a boundary that did not need words to exist. Lucien gathered his documents without ceremony, without asking anyone for approval. His movements were as controlled as they had been from the start. When the session ended, the room emptied slowly in small groups. People whispered carefully. Shoes clicked softly on the tiled floor. I stayed seated a little longer, letting the air settle back into its normal shape. I understood that the real power in this room was never in shouting, fear, or persuasion. The power came from letting the truth stay visible once it was placed in the light. I walked out without looking back. I carried nothing in my hands but carried everything in my composure. 6 months later, my life looked very different. Not because of luck or someone coming to rescue me, but because of quiet decisions I had made without witnesses, without noise, and without asking permission from anyone who once controlled my world. My mom lost more than just money during these months. Her status in the community slipped quietly through her fingers. Things she had once taken for granted, like admiration and respect, disappeared slowly. People who had once praised her choices now avoided her. They avoided conversations with her, avoided looking her in the eye, and avoided being near her. Reputation does not fall loudly. It erodes quietly, like whispers that cannot be stopped, like water slowly wearing away stone. Life moved on without announcements, without noise, without anyone publicly noticing the slow changes. Isolde's world changed quietly, one small thing at a time. Trips she had planned vanished as if they had never been there. Money that had seemed secure became fragile. Promises that had once sounded strong grew thin. Family members divided themselves quietly, some reaching out to me secretly, others hiding behind silence because comfort had always felt easier than truth. In these months, I saw how little effort I actually needed to make. I did not argue. I did not fight. I did not explain anything. I simply stopped responding the way they were used to. The balance of power shifted on its own, just because I stopped giving them what they relied on to control me. This time, silence made me stronger, not weaker. It placed me beyond the reach of old patterns they had learned to use to manipulate me. When my mom tried calling again, I let the phone ring until it stopped. I did not want to repeat conversations I had already understood. There was no joy in winning, no desire for revenge, no satisfaction in watching everything collapse. Only a very clear understanding. Real control comes not from shouting, forcing, or destroying, but from stepping back far enough that others have to face the results of their own actions. For the first time, my inner world shifted. It was not toward relief or happiness. It was toward quiet stability. I understood that I no longer belonged to old roles people tried to place me in. The silence became strong. It carried steadiness that was difficult to shake. When the courtroom session came, it was cold, not because of the heater but because every sound felt sharper, louder, impossible to escape. I sat at the end of the bench, hands in my lap, feeling the grain of the wood under my fingers. The room slowly filled with footsteps, whispers, and controlled breathing. The official session started quietly. Papers were moved, clerks whispered, the judge observed carefully. Lucian stood up and explained the problems using the documents. No loud gestures, no shouting. Every mistake was clear. His voice was calm, steady, and logical. Each detail was undeniable. My mom's confidence drained quietly. Isolde answered questions clearly without drama. When the judge froze the money and property, silence filled the room. It was quiet understanding, not shock. I remained still, calm, eyes forward. When the session ended, the room emptied slowly. People whispered, shoes clicked softly. I walked out without looking back, carrying nothing but composure. 6 months later, my life was completely different. My mom lost not only money but respect. People avoided her. Reputation eroded quietly, like whispers that cannot be stopped. My life was quiet, steady, and independent, built from choices I made on my own. Isolde did not go anywhere, even though she had shown online that she might, because she started running out of money slowly until she had none. People who had promised to help her or who had liked her fancy life stopped helping when they saw she did not have money anymore. She could not get loans, favors, chances, or support that she thought would always be there. I did not step in. I did not say anything. I did not explain because being quiet had become my rule and staying away had become my strength. I left Nashville without telling anyone, choosing a city far enough away so that nobody could expect things from me or control me. The first morning in the new city felt different. Not because it was fun but because it was mine. I worked long hours not because I was worried or desperate but because I wanted to build my life calmly. I did not need people to clap, say good job, or approve because those people never had the right to control my life. When I was ready, I bought a house using only the money I had earned myself by being patient, working hard, and refusing to give up control. The keys felt heavy but not just because they were keys. They were proof that I could rebuild my life without losing anything. I did not invite anyone to see the house. I did not send pictures or share the address because my life was no longer for others to watch or judge. I stopped talking to people. No calls, no messages, no visits. Some people tried to reach me but I stayed quiet. Sometimes, peace means leaving old patterns behind that only worked because you kept responding to them. Without fights or problems, my life became steady in a real way. It was not fake or forced and it did not depend on what other people thought. I no longer measured my worth by what others said. I no longer reacted. I no longer explained. I simply lived. Real power does not come from yelling, proving things, or fighting with people who want control. It comes from knowing when to step back without telling anyone, when to build your life without needing approval, and when to walk away without looking back. Being independent does not mean getting back at others or winning over them. It means choosing a life where nobody can take your peace away, reduce it, twist it, or threaten it. Boundaries are not walls to punish people. They are gates that protect your future.